one of the major aspects of the Bible, obviously, is worship. And when we think about the idea of a kind of a conflict of kingdoms, and that's not just physical, but spiritual, what is it about worship that is so important as far as the spiritual realm is concerned? Why do any of these spiritual beings want to be worshipped? Why does God want to be worshipped? Why does Satan want to be worshipped? And it seems to be that worship is at the heart of this conflict. And can you shed some light on that?
It's a good question. I can give more of a point of correspondence, but to a certain degree, we all kind of have a tendency to want to be worshipped, and we may not want to get up on a stage, and maybe we do actually with a guitar in hand and get worshipped or something. But I think there's something innate that there's an appeal to selfishness in that worship and stuff, but I think it's about having great value. Mm-hmm. But the truth is, there's no greater value to have than being exactly who God has designed us to be, and that you're not going to be at the top of the hierarchy, but you still can't have a better value than fitting right into where God has designed you to be.
Yeah, I think that in our modern world, because we're largely unfamiliar with what worship is, and we don't know how to contextualize it into the modern world. As an example, what is really happening if we have an election? We have two different leaders, and if you ask a modern person, which one they're going to vote for, they'll maybe tell you, maybe they won't, but in their mind they have an idea of who they're going to vote for. In their mind, that vote has nothing to do with worship. But at its heart, I think that worship really is at the heart of everything that we do. But as modern people, we just don't realize it. And I think that this conflict that Jesus is engaged in the spiritual realm is really a conflict about worship. And it helps us to see that that's really the heart of every conflict that we kind of engage in the modern world. We just, as modern people, can't see it. Is there a way that we could explain that?
So I think you're saying that maybe anything that involves choice ultimately has to come down to worship. You're ascribing value to one thing over another. And so whether that be, one leader versus a rebel leader, if you choose a side, you're ascribing greater value, at least, either to the country or maybe to your personal well-being or something like that, to one side over the other. And same thing in the spiritual kingdom here. Either you give your allegiance to God, or you give your allegiance to those who are opposed to Him, and you're finding greater value in one or the other.
Yeah, I think that every king, that's, if you obey his laws, there's an element of worship value that you're ascribing to that, and we don't see that in the modern world very often. We tend to ascribe it to different things, but really, like you said, it's about ascribing value to something. And there's the saying that imitation is the highest form of flattery. And is there a worship aspect involved in that idea?
I think so. I think we've spent some time in other studies talking about having an ideal and things of this sort. And we've also talked about what you worship, you tend to become. Mm-hmm. And so having the right ideals that you do worship, you do have a tendency to kind of align who you are more down that path and become more and more like that object or subject. And so imitation, being a form of flattery, is a form of worship in that sense as well.
Yeah, there's an interesting idea that we see throughout Jesus's interactions, conflicts with the demonic in his ministry, and that is that these demons have a desire to have a body. How can we understand that in the modern world, and what does that have to do with kind of this idea of imitation and flattery and worship?
Boy, that's a great question. I don't know if I fully understand why they want to have a body and stuff like this, but maybe it's they want to in some way have their will manifest in the physical world, and what do you want to call that? Having a body, is the path to that or something like that. But and having their will done and adopted and things of this sort is a sense of getting self-worship for that spirit, if you will.
Yeah, there's this interesting concept that we have this spiritual world where things aren't embodied, And the thing that it seems like the spiritual world really desires is to have a connection with the physical world. And as modern people, we just go about our lives, right? I'm going to do this today. I'm going to do that today. We don't think of the fact that there's a spiritual world out there that desires to be manifested, and that as priests, we are really the tool of manifesting that. And so we don't think about the fact that, as we go through our day, we're either manifesting a spirit that is in submission to God or one that's opposed to God. And how might our lives change if we did see our lives that way?
Probably pretty profoundly. You can think of like a well manicured lawn, and this might be a terrible analogy, but you can work in the physical to kind of put everything in its place and to make it just perfect, right? And to look well and stuff like this. And for many of us, we kind of maybe restrict what we have an influence on to the physical in making it look good and being at in alignment with God and stuff like this. But how much better to actually influence the world around us, the people around us, to have a spiritual alignment with God, and how much greater that is than, say, a well manicured lawn.
Yeah, and I think that all through our day we're used to making kind of decisions and evaluating what we're going to do one day on kind of what do I feel like doing, not what does this bring me in alignment with? Does this bring me in alignment? Am I manifesting spiritual things that are submitting to God and are according to His will and desires, or am I manifesting things that are opposed to that? We're coming to Halloween, and this is obviously one of those spooky things. What do we take from this idea of spiritual conflict, the idea of worship, as far as this time of year? Is there anything that as Christians we should be careful of, we should be aware of, or we should be learning about this?
I guess not to be so caught up maybe in the kind of the immediate details only, but to kind of see the bigger picture of the spiritual reality that's around us. And as you pointed out, are things either aligning up with what God wants or the opposite? And really, there's only two camps. There's no neutral ground here. And so rather than getting caught up, say, in this character and this individual, let's say demon or something like this, maybe just a better picture of the larger battle and where do I fall into this?